Good morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night, whenever you're watching this. My name's Mr. Koble. I teach 8th grade U.S. history at Audubon K through 8 in San Diego, California. And today you're going to learn about the French-Indian War, or if you are anywhere outside the United States, it is known as the 7 Years' War. So as far as the causes, the first one is you have French colonies, which is the blue on the map, start competing with English colonies for resources. So especially in this area where the blue and the red overlap, like that goes through Ohio and Pennsylvania and Kentucky and Tennessee and all those, all the way down to New Orleans, there starts to be fights over resources. These resources are fur is like one of the most important ones. Not only is it highly fashionable, but it gets cold out there, and that was used back then to make you warm. And then land is the other one, especially Ohio. Ohio is actually like the most desirable wanted area at this time, which is weird because no one likes Ohio now. One of the reasons for this was fur. The other one was because the Ohio River attaches to this Mississippi River that goes all the way down to New Orleans. And a lot of economies were very based on that river transport of goods. So if you're a farmer, you put a box of wheat or whatever on a boat. The boat goes down the river. It goes all the way down to New Orleans. Very important. Also, the French and English just don't like each other. The second big cause was that Native Americans had been attacked and decimated by British colonists for like 100 years. They have not had good interactions. The British colonists thought of them as savages, like systemically like hunted them down, had huge wars, burned down entire towns and villages, really grotesque things. And we're going to learn more about that in California later in the year. But they had not had good interactions. Like Taylor Swift, they had bad blood. All right, and that's going to be enough of that. So this war is in 1754. It takes place about 20 years before the Revolution starts. And this war is very poorly named. It is not between the French and the Indians. It is the France and natives in one corner, so they are fighting together, versus Britain and other natives. So most Native Americans felt more friendly to the French because the French had better interactions with them than the British colonists did. But a couple tribes supported the British colonists. But basically, you have Native Americans on both sides, and then it's France versus Britain. And here's the video.
From the very beginning, colonialism in America meant competition. European countries were eager to gobble up as much land as possible in the New World. Sometimes this competition turned into open warfare, and the French and Indian War is a perfect example of this. Here's a crash course of 5 things about the war to get you up to speed. North America was a big, beautiful place full of endless opportunities, and Great Britain and France each wanted a piece of the action. The British controlled their 13 colonies and were looking to expand west. The French occupied Canada and were looking to expand south. It was inevitable that they'd bump into each other, and that's exactly what happened in the Ohio River Valley, an important trading area with access to the Mississippi River. The French and Indian War marked the debut of 21-year-old George Washington, a lieutenant colonel for the militia in the British colony of Virginia. In 1754, he was ordered to protect a British fort near what is now Pittsburgh. On the way, Washington encountered a French military unit, and the two sides fought in the first battle of the French and Indian War, the Battle of Jumonville Glen. Washington was young, but he was quickly gaining the experience he would need to eventually command the Continental Army. Years of territorial scuffles turned into full-blown declarations of war in 1756. As fighting broke out, the British and French sought allies among the local Native American populations. The French were familiar with many tribes through trade and recruited the Potawatomi, Winnebago, Ojibwa, Mississauga, and the Huron, while the British turned to the Iroquois Confederacy. At first, the French were winning, a lot. They simply had more troops and better supplies than the British Army and drove them back towards the 13 colonies. But the tide turned in 1757 when British Secretary of State William Pitt took control of the war effort. Dreaming of a vast British Empire, he made it his mission to defeat the French in North America, pouring in generous funds to beef up military resources on the ground. The war ended with the French defeat at the Battle of Quebec and the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1763. The British gained control of Canada and all land east of the Mississippi River. It may seem that the British made out well after all was said and done, but there was a catch. You see, William Pitt borrowed heavily to finance the French and Indian War, which left his nation in tons of debt. To make up for it, the British taxed American colonists up the wazoo. Americans didn't particularly appreciate this. Years of protests, rallies, town hall meetings, and petitions would eventually lead to the American Revolution and the creation of the United States. The French and Indian War may not have had the glorious battles or fearless heroes of other great conflicts, but it was one of the most consequential wars in American history. It also opened the eyes of a young military leader to the tyranny of the British, a man who would go on to be the first American president.
Wow, so cool. And I'm probably going to get copyrighted for showing that video, showing a YouTube video in another video. So what I want you guys to do is go on to Brain Pop. You can sign on through Clever. Really good video on the French-Indian War, basically the exact same thing, and it's pretty straightforward. Now, as far as the consequences of the war, the big one is Britain goes into a lot of debt defending the colonists, and they need some of that money back. So they say, hey, you know what? We just spent all this money fighting in America for the colonists to protect them. We should have them pay their debt. And to do that, let's put taxes on them. Colonists say, hey, like, can we at least vote on that? And they go, no. Oh yeah, and George Washington starts his military career.
A lot of sudden
And
events.
this channel is absolutely fantastic, by the way. If you haven't subscribed to it yet, it's called Oversimplified. Really, really great channel.
Under my nickname, Oversimplified. Now, where was I? Oh yeah, Columbus, time of his life, hammock. And suddenly the race was on to explore and conquer the New World. After a couple centuries of warring with the natives and each other, the European powers had claimed quite a lot of land, including this area, which both the English and the French claimed as theirs. One day the French said, I'm gonna build some forts along here, and the English were like, could you not? And the French said, sorry, but no, I could not. And they went ahead and built their forts, which pissed off the English, so they sent an up-and-coming British lieutenant colonel by the name of George Washington with a combined force of British troops and Native Americans. After a short battle, the French commander said, all right, we surrender. Okay, boys, pack it up. There's surrender. Oh, sorry, was I not meant to split his head open with a tomahawk? Don't worry, it's not like this will start a 7-year-long major global conflict. And what happened next was a 7-year-long major global conflict, which Great Britain won. At the peace negotiations, Spain gave up Florida, while France gave up all of its territories in North America. But Britain's victory came at a cost, a £60 million cost. They were now broke, in a lot of debt, and had to come up with some way to repay it. So they went to the colonies and said, okay, listen up. So a huge part of the war was spent protecting you from the French, and now we have no money because of it. So... I'm not sure what you're saying here. Okay, so we spent a lot of money protecting you from the French, right? Right. And now we're broke. That certainly is a pickle. Listen to me. We spent all of our money protecting you, and now we need money. Can you please pay us back some money? No. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and tax you. In 1764, Britain introduced the Sugar Act, forcing the colonists to import sugar and molasses exclusively from the British and to pay duties on them. Then a year later, they introduced the extremely controversial Stamp Act, and it worked a little something like this. Hello, shopkeep. Hello, Mr. Bungleberry. Here's the deed for your new shack. Stamp. That'll be 3 pence, please. Wait, what was that? It's the new tax. I get a stamp on any paper or documentation I make, and you have to pay for it. Would you like to see this pamphlet that explains everything? Yes, please. Okay. Stamp. 2 pence, please. This is awful. You know what? Just give me a deck of cards so I can go gamble my pain away. Okay. No. Don't do it. Stamp. Obviously, the colonists were like, hey, my dudes, this new tax
All right, and this is going to go into the Stamp Act, which is a different lesson for right after this. But why do we care? The biggest reason we care is it's the primary cause of all the taxes put on the colonists. So every cause of the revolution that's going to come up kind of goes back to the French Indian War. It starts George Washington's rise to fame, and in 20 years, he will end up leading the Continental Army. The French lose control of Canada, so French used to be in Canada. That's why parts of Canada speak French. And then Native Americans continue to just take L's. They lose a lot of land, and they basically lose their way of life in some of the areas that Britain took over after the war ends. So French Indian War is going to lead to a lot of protests down the line because of the taxes and the debt. And that is all I have for you. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know.